Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. We have the final Group A matchup, BenjyFishy, the 16-year-old pro Fortnite streamer, versus Sardoche, the French variety streamer. And man, this is going to be a good matchup. People have predicted that either of these players could win the entire tournament, so we're looking at some high-quality chess games here. And without further ado, let's see who is going to win this matchup. Sardoche is the rating favorite, but Benji has been training a lot, so who knows? This match could go to anyone and has been highly anticipated. BenjyFishy, we've seen him start with the ready opening in his match versus Nico and the English in his match versus Myth. So which one of those openings will he go with the white pieces, or will he start with something completely different? We have knight f3, the ready opening, and d5 from Sardoche. We have d4, knight f6, c4, c6, and we've transposed into a Slav game. We have bishop g5 and e6 from Sardoche, now taking sort of a semi-Slav structure. Here, Sardoche, after bishop g5, could have actually gone for this d cross c4 move, and then tried to hang on to this pawn after a sequence like e3. Sardoche could have played a move like b5 and tried to hang on to this pawn even after a4. This queen f3 tactic that traps the rook is not there after. I mean, you don't even need to play a6 here, but the knight is on f3, so Sardoche could try to hang on to this pawn and be a pawn up, but instead we have e6 from Sardoche, which is a totally fine move as well. We have e3 from Benji and bishop e7 from Sardoche. Bishop d3, and here is Sardoche. Here is black, really. Once this bishop has moved, now is really the time you want to take this c4 pawn, because the bishop has moved, so if you can take this pawn and attack the bishop, you're basically going to win a tempo here because you're forcing the bishop to move again. So if there's any time to take this c pawn, now would be the time. Will Sardoche do it? No, instead he just castles, which is totally fine as well. BenjyFishy castles. We have knight bd7, knight c3, and a6 from Sardoche. b3 from Benji, and so far we're on move 9 and no pieces have been traded. So we're looking at a very positional game potentially in our futures. Also, one thing to note is that Sardoche has placed all of his pawns on light squares, and his light squared bishops may have trouble later in the game because of this. So we'll just have to see what Sardoche does with that light squared bishop. We have h6 from Sardoche now, and bishop h4, not going for this trade from Benji. Good on him for that. We have b5 now from Sardoche, and we have c5 from Benji, not taking this pawn. This is definitely the right call from Benji. You're basically clamping down on this position and saying, okay, you've put all your pawns on light squares. Now what are you doing with your light squared bishop? This light squared bishop for black is just going to be a thorn. It's just going to be a piece that's not doing anything and getting in the way of black's other pieces for the rest of this game. And that's just something you have to be aware of when you are structuring your pawns in the opening and early middle game. We have rook e8 from Sardoche and knight e2 from Benji. And instead of this knight e2 move, I really would have liked it if Benji had simply played b4. And this basically prevents a5, because here as Sardoche, you have to recognize that your light squared bishop is really your worst piece, and you want to get it traded off. And one of the ways you can do that is by pushing a5 and b5, and then bringing your bishop to a6. And that's one way you can activate it. So here as white, you want to stop black from playing a5 with the move, with this move b4, and now it will be hard. Even if white can trade off this a pawn, the bishop will still be stuck behind this b pawn now on a dark square. So here Benji could have played b4, but instead we have knight e2, and now this actually gives Sardoche a chance to activate his light squared bishop with the move e5. And this is a temporary pawn sacrifice after d cross e5, but then Sardoche can play knight e4 This is a discovered attack on the bishop, so this gives white a few options. They can either trade bishops, bishop cross e7, and after queen cross e7, this pawn will fall soon, and this diagonal will be open for the bishop. Sardoche will get his bishop into the game and be totally fine. Or if the bishop instead retreats to g3, this is even worse for white because now we can have knight takes g3, and after knight takes g3, simply bishop cross c5, and this pawn will likely fall soon. Not only has this diagonal opened up, but now white will also be down a pawn soon after this e5 pawn falls. So that is one way how Sardoche could have activated his light squared bishop after this knight e2 sort of inaccuracy by Benjy. But instead we have the immediate knight e4 from Sardoche. And so we have this trade, bishop cross e7, queen cross e7, and now rook c1. Once again, this was definitely a chance for Benjy to play this b4 move. But because this rook c1 move, it seems like it's doing something. Like the rook may seem more mobile on the c1 square than on the a1 square, for example, but really this c file is not opening up anytime soon, so it's probably not really the most useful move for c1 is. But we have it. We have knight d f6, and now knight f4 from Benjy. We have a5, so Sardoche finally plays this a5 move, which is definitely good for him, and we have a4 from Benjy. We have b4 from Sardoche, and really taking or pushing here are both fine moves. I think I would have taken just to open up some lines and try to open things up, because I think if you have a space deficit like black does here, it's good to try to open things up to remove that space deficit. However, b4, it's kind of grabbing space. I think either move is fine here. But Sardoche plays b4. We have knight e5 from Benjy and bishop b7, now defending this c-pawn which Benjy was attacking. I think queen c7 would have been a better move here, because once again, this bishop really wants to come to a6, so you don't want it on b7, sort of just tied down defending this c-pawn. And also the queen is not really doing much on e7, so I think queen c7 and looking to play bishop a6 later would have been better here from Sardoche positionally. But we have bishop b7. We have now f3 from Sardoche, kicking that knight, and knight to c3. Now attacking the queen. We have queen d2 and knight d7. Now we have knight e2 from Benjy, so just trying to remove this knight now, and this forces Sardoche to trade if he doesn't want to lose any material. We have knight takes e2 and queen takes e2, knight takes e5, d takes e5, and now rook a7. Once again, Sardoche wants to bring this bishop to a6, but now with this queen bishop diagonal, he needs to double up first. So here Sardoche is just looking to double up. We have f4 from Benjy and rook a to e8 from Sardoche. We have f5 from Benjy, and this is actually a mistake. You don't want to be making this break, because it does allow this sequence, e takes f5, and after rook takes f5, here Sardoche can actually play bishop c8, and now this rook has to move away from the defense of this pawn, say back to f1, and after queen takes e5, this bishop will now be able to activate itself. You may think that the rook can come to h5, however, this runs into g6, and now the rook is actually trapped. So after rook takes h6, you can play king g7 or queen g5. Either move traps the rook. We could have queen g5, and this would definitely not be good for white. So yeah, this f5 break, definitely not very good. Better would have been simply to play e4, just not allowing either of these pawns to move, and hopefully the light squared bishop for black stays inactive. But we have f5 from Benjy. Sardoche does go for this e takes f5. We have rook takes f5, and instead of bishop to c8, we instead have the immediate g6 from Sardoche, which is not as strong, but it has the right idea of removing this rook from the defense of this pawn. So we have rook back to f3 and queen takes e5. Now we have rook cf1 from Benjy, now just pressuring this f7 pawn, and here Sardoche blunders. He plays rook f8, and this actually steps into a pin, so now you notice that this rook is only defended once, so it's attacked, or it's pressured twice. Both of these rooks are now pinning this pawn to this rook, and the pawn, this f pawn, is the only thing that defends this g pawn. So here, white can actually take this pawn on g6, which BenjyFishy does. So yeah, here as Sardoche, if we go back a couple moves, you actually need to play bishop to c8 and defend this pawn laterally. And this is just really a difficult move to see, to move your bishop backwards and defend laterally, especially when this direct defense of rook f8 is available. So yeah, in case you're wondering, bishop a6 doesn't actually work because now there's bishop takes a6, and after rook takes a6, you remove the defense of the rook because the rook is overworked. So bishop a6 doesn't work. Bishop c8 was the only move available for Sardoche in this position. But we have rook f8 instead, and bishop takes g6. Now we have bishop a6, so Sardoche finally getting that bishop into the game. And here Benji needs to drop this bishop back to avoid losing material, since this bishop was skewering the queen and the rook. So he needs to drop this bishop back to block the skewer. But he doesn't see this. Instead, he simply plays queen f2. He thinks he has to lose this material here. He even said in the post-match interview that he didn't see that he could drop this bishop back. So Sardoche will win the exchange here. We have bishop takes f1 and queen takes f1, and now queen e7 from Sardoche. We have bishop h5 because now black was threatening to take this bishop, and now black is up the exchange, but their king side is ripped open, so they will have to defend accurately in order to maintain their advantage. So will Sardoche be able to do it? Here he plays queen takes c5, and this move actually immediately loses because of this sequence, which starts with rook g3 check, and basically no matter where the king moves, you're going to check again with the queen. So if the king comes to h8, the queen can check on f6, and then king h7, and this would be immediately checkmate. Or if the king comes to h7 instead, first we check on f5, forcing the king to h8, and then we come to f6, king comes to h7, and we have queen g7 checkmate instead. So will Benji see this rook g3 check move? Yes, he does. He starts with rook g3 check, and we have king h8 from Sardoche. Now will Benji see that he has to play queen f6 for checkmate? Yes, he does. He plays queen f6 check, and it's all over for Sardoche after king h7 and queen g7, and this is checkmate. So BenjyFishy pulls the upset against Sardoche, and Sardoche will have to win the second game to bring this match to an Armageddon. Will he be able to do it? Yeah, definitely a very exciting game, very positional. This is probably the highest quality PogChamps game we've seen so far in this tournament. So I'm looking forward to more of this high quality chess once we get to the championship bracket. And yeah, both of these players are just really promising upcoming chess players. Like they both played extremely well in this game. So congrats to both of them. And I don't think I have anything else to say about this game or this match, so thank you for watching. I love you all. Be sure to like and subscribe. And check out my PogChamps 3 playlist. It's up there. And check out the next game in this match over there on the left side of the screen. I'll see you next time.